It is the most popular novel of all time. It has been translated into every written language. It has been a stage play and an opera. And now, one of the most imaginative film directors at work today takes a fascinating new look at the Three Musketeers.
The overriding aim was to be true to Dumas himself.
Richard Lester, director of The Beatles in Help and A Hard Day's Night, has developed his own unique approach to the Three Musketeers. It is his intention, as accurately as possible, to capture the reality of the era.
I've tried to keep some awareness for the audience at all times that we are in the 17th century and that it was a very dirty century.
Part of the way you achieve the period is by the accuracy of detail. You can't let the actresses use the hairdos they like.
Diamonds have to be real. The feathers are real.
It will be absolutely true to period, more so than has ever been done before.
In creating his film, the director stresses not merely the adventure, the intrigue, and the romance of the original novel, but also its inherent comic qualities. And comedy is Lester's forte. The 17th century was a complex, exciting period. And true to history, the story is rich and complicated. All the characters in the Three Musketeers are based on historical figures.
Well, I played D'Artagnan. He's the kind of the young man, in a way, the kind of hero whose story revolves around his adventures.
D'Artagnan, a bumbling country boy, arrives in Paris and soon runs into the Musketeers. Oliver Reed plays Athos. Frank Finlay is the arrogant Porthos, and Richard Chamberlain is Aramis. D'Artagnan finds that the lives of the Musketeers are dedicated to three things: pleasure, patriotism, and a good fight. D'Artagnan's sweetheart is Constance Bonacieux, played by Raquel Welch.
She's rather pathetic because she really wants to do the best things for everybody, and she likes everybody. But she ends up sort of messing everything up with all her good intentions.
Geraldine Chaplin is the Queen of France. Simon Ward is her lover, the Duke of Buckingham, Prime Minister of England.
Give me something to remember you by.
Jean-Pierre Cassel is the foolish king, Louis XIII. Conspiring against the Queen is the ambitious Cardinal Richelieu, played by Charlton Heston.
He's, in a sense, really the most interesting man in the piece. Certainly the most powerful, certainly the most complicated, certainly the most intelligent.
Richelieu's accomplices are Milady de Winter, played by Faye Dunaway, and Christopher Lee as Rochefort.
Rochefort is really the villain of the piece in every sense. He is the lover of Milady, and he is the right-hand man of Cardinal Richelieu. He's also the best swordsman in the whole of France.
Surprisingly, composer Michel Legrand had never worked on a period picture before. And for this film, he was racing against an almost impossible time limit.
It should take me at least 2.5 months, 3 months, but they gave me 10 days. But in this case, I had to approach it at a jet speed.
More than anything else, The Three Musketeers is an action story. And the film contains a number of extremely difficult but masterfully choreographed fight scenes. Careful planning went into every sequence, but sometimes accidents were unavoidable.
And I must say we're working here with a marvelous bunch of stuntmen who really know their stuff. For the most part, it's been practical to do as much of one's own stunt work as possible.
Generally, in the long run, the actors have done their own fights, and they've used real swords. I've had all the rubber ones and all the plastic stuff and everything for safety, but generally, by the time we come to shoot it, they're using the real stuff.
Oliver Reed got a sword to his wrist and came out the other side, fortunately.
Christopher Lee broke an elbow, and
the horses kept throwing people.
My nose seems to be an object which attracts all kinds of danger. In this picture, I've cut it twice. Miraculously, I haven't had to cut my eyes out.
It was something terribly dangerous. Well, we might have an accident. Of course, we don't allow the actor to do it. We don't allow him, even if he wants to.
Making a picture the size of the Three Musketeers is incredibly detailed work. Shooting can go on for months with seemingly endless retakes and changes. The hot Mediterranean sun and heavy period costumes add to the discomfort. However, the good humor of the film carried over to the day-to-day work.
I think I'm having more fun on the Three Musketeers than anything I've done for a long time.
It's a fun movie to make.
The main objective is to entertain the public.
Entertainment is what Alexandre Dumas had in mind over a century ago when he wrote The Three Musketeers.
When I started, and I was around 18 or 19, in those days, I was more a la Oliver Reed, young, without his talent, but I was doing all kind of crazy things. And that's when one day my father said to me, look, that's it, you know, or you're going to work with me now, or you just go and do whatever you want to do. My father and grandfather were in a tremendously bad situation in France. This was after these great movies, the Austerlitz and The Trial, but they all bombed, and they were basically bankrupt. And the name Salkind in Paris was not welcome in terms of business. And then gradually I started coming up with some ideas, and it really started with a film that my father was able to buy for about $1,000 in those days, called Barragan against Gamerat. And that little film that cost $1,000, he was able to make $3,000 or $4,000. And we were trying to find something else we could sell. And I see a script, The Light at the Edge of the World, by Jules Verne. So I came back to my father after reading. I said, you know, this is a great script here. You got a big movie. You might even have a big American movie here. And that was the first real hit that my father had, and he paid all his debts. He got out of everything. And then, of course, I did the Roman Gary film, and then the Bluebeard film, which was already more successful in the States. And we were talking, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
And Ilya called me one morning and said, listen, at dinner last night we thought of an idea. We're going to redo the Three Musketeers. I said, okay, it's been done.
So I went to see the old ones, you know, the Gene Kelly one, and then I started to dwell on it, and I read the original book, because a lot of people read the children's version, which is totally censored and simplified. Now, the original book is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, but the thing here, we got to find something that is different, that has some kind of angle, because just doing it as a swashbuckler, simple, that's not going to be enough. Why don't we do it with like Bob Hope, Danny Kaye, and Jerry Lewis? You know, and make it funny. My father, well, I said, no, okay, well. So what about the Beatles?
I think it's not such a good idea to have the Beatles, because their personality is so strong that you will not relate to the characters of the Musketeers.
And then I said, should be like Tom Jones. And in those days, they had done the Tony Richardson had done Tom Jones' wonderful film. We called Tony Richardson in London, and we have a lunch. Richardson and my father and myself, and you know, towards the middle of the lunch, talking about the project, and Tony says, yes, I think that we could do it. I love Musketeers. But I'd love to see them in a convent. I'd love to see them in a convent, and I'd like to see, you know, an old Athos who's very, very depressed, and Aramis and Porthos trying to console him, and then D'Artagnan doesn't want to stay there. And it all takes place in this convent. Yeah, my father and I, we look at each other like that and say, Tony, that sounds like a very interesting idea, but I think enjoy the dessert. So then started the quest for a director.
Richard Lester had an enormous reputation, I think, as a filmmaker. I think, probably because of the Beatles film, that really kind of, it was his madcap style, this wonderful kind of comic and sort of irreverent vision of just stirring things up. It went hand in glove with the spirit of the times. You know, London was going through its swinging London phase, and the whole of Britain was having a sort of celebration. So it was a very, very exciting new kind of comic cinema.
Yeah, but he hasn't worked for a while, and then I even heard he didn't want to work, and he's not interested. And let's face it, let's be brutal. The last films were not very successful. I mean, so I went to see all his films. I went to see Petulia. I went to see The Knack. I went to see The Beatles again, and I went to see On the Way to the Forum. And I said, my God, this guy has a tremendous range. I mean, and I called Lester. We're doing the Three Musketeers. Are you interested, to talk about it? And he said, oh, come on, this is a children's picture. And I said, did you read the original book? And he said, no. I said, all right, I'm sending you the book. And about 3-4 days later, he called and says, I'm interested.
We took for the screenplay George MacDonald Fraser, who I believe it was his first screenplay. He had written the Flashman novels, which were very successful, and which had this humor integrated in history.
George MacDonald Fraser was the choice that Richard came up with, and he did a great script.
The Musketeer's motto, young man, is one for all and all for one, which loosely translated means 10 for him, 10 for him, 10 for you, and 10 for me.
My father was absolutely a wizard at raising finances. So the film was financed entirely without any American money or no studio. And more than that, we could really cast the movie literally perfectly.
The reality is that it wasn't too difficult for two reasons. That A, we had a great screenplay. We really had a wonderful screenplay. B, having Richard Lester attached was a great temptation for all the actors.
The offer to play D'Artagnan in a Richard Lester movie was not to be lightly dismissed.
I had a phone call from my agent who said Mr. Lester, Dick Lester, or Richard Lester, would like to see you in his office at Twickenham Studios, where he thinks he might be offering you the role of Porthos in a film of the Three Musketeers.
I offered the part of Athos to Charlton Heston.
Well, at first there was some talk of my playing one of the Musketeers, which would have been okay, but Dick Lester actually urged me to play the Cardinal. I said, well, why can't I play one of the Buckingham maybe, more interesting. He said, no. He said, you believe me, Chuck, trust me, you will like the role. And he was absolutely right.
I do not like to lose.
You must suit yourself, milady. But if in the end you should, do it with a becoming grace.
I did my research on him, and it's a fascinating part, really. I love doing it.
And he came back and said, I think I could do Richelieu, which took us a bit aback, because historically Richelieu was about 5 feet tall and very thin, so totally non-Charlton Heston.
I don't do sleight very well, so I did my best to do Richelieu, and my own height is my own height, and it seemed to work all right.
I must say, I was a little bit amazed that they asked me to do this particular role, because from my childhood memories, I remember Three Musketeers, and I think it was Lana Turner and June Allison. And June Allison had the part they offered to me, so I thought, why would I be playing the June Allison role? What's wrong with this picture? In the end, I just put my confidence in Dick Lester.
Oh. I must go now. Promise you, old fellow.
I think it was the old familiar story of somebody calling my agent and saying, we've got a script. One script, I hasten to add. And it's called The Three Musketeers. And we're going to make it in Spain And because we know that your client, Christopher Lee, has more experience of sword fights than anyone practically in history in front of a camera, which was and still is true. And I have the scars to prove it.
Stand up and fight, you coward!
I think there were 120 locations to be dressed and 120 sets we built. And we'd lost about a month's pre-production in terms of the art department at that time, because they were booking this huge cast of stars and they had a start date and come hell or high water.
We were able to group like the Musketeer scenes together, and then the Richelieu, Christopher Lee, Faye Dunaway scenes together, and then so you kind of split. You split the time with the actors, but it's a lot of logistics, yes.
We had all these people, and each one was entitled to his own trailer with 25 cars, with 25 drivers, just for the cast.
I remember walking on the set, the first day the Musketeers were in costume, the 4 guys, and it was magic. It was bigger than life. They were just together, the 4, in costume.
We were headquartered in Madrid, and which was wonderful because we were able to use all the great royal palaces that lie in the hinterland. It was Spain in the 70s, which was still sort of unchanged Spain.
Spain was under Franco at that time. Fantastic. Money would get you anywhere. We shot on the steps of the Royal Palace, in Franco's palace, the right brown envelope at the right moment. There were no limitations, all those epic pictures went there because of the cooperation you had, cooperation meaning bribery.
Spain was used to big films. Samuel Bronson had been making films in Spain, such as 55 Days of Peking.
We were walking near this river's edge in Spain where I had made a couple of pictures, most recently El Cid. And I said, I made a picture here before, this very spot. And Richard said, do you remember where they put the camera?
And the summers in Spain, in Madrid, and around can get up to 40 degrees centigrade quite easily. Now, if you put those clothes on and you wear high heels and you've got makeup with a wig and a beard and a heavy sword, well, it's certainly not easy. There was an occasion in the film where everybody in the cast is there in the courtyard of this palace. Got all the extras, the courtiers, and you've got all the other people. There wasn't much water going around. People were dropping like flies. They were fainting right and left. Do you know what the temperature was there? Because somebody took it, 52. And they say it's so easy making a movie.
We were filming in Spain, where the horses have the same sort of spirit as the Spanish people. They're very colorful and a little bit wild and spirited, especially at the beginning of the day. But then again, it was it was essential to the film. And now, when I see a horse, I'm not as intimidated as I was before the summer of the Musketeers.
I only ride a horse when I'm paid for it. And I remember one particular shot with Raquel Welch, Miss Welch. I'd put her in the saddle, and I got on to the rump of the horse, and then we had this very, very long shot across this prairie. And I did it a couple of times with Raquel's double as a test, as a tryout. Then Miss Welch came on, and I sat on the rump of the horse behind her. And she said, "I tell you what, Frank," she said, "I'm a very good horsewoman. I'll ride the horse, you hang on to me."
Raquel, she was a wee bit worried at the outset. She had never worked with Lester. She was worried on how the humor would be treated.
A Los Angeles costume designer had made my costumes. And during the course of the fittings, we were told to be very, very authentic, 16th century, and of course that was our intent. But the thing about the 16th century in France was that the women's dresses had these cinched waists with all these stays and boning in them, but there was almost like a board thing that came right up the front here and would push your breasts up, up, and away, you know. I said, oh no. It really did look like there was a crowd in the balcony.
Raquel wanted to discuss certain things before coming to Madrid. And it created once a real tension, which we then I had to talk with the lawyers, representatives, and so forth.
So when I arrived with these custom-made costumes of mine, you know, Dick nearly had a fit. He went, oh my God, it's totally wrong. That's not the way it's supposed to look. And we had a little sort of thing about it. I won.
I think Raquel was a little overprotected by her representation, even to the extent that a document was circulated, you know, about how she should be treated and so on.
And her agent or her manager, I'm not quite sure what it was, came along and said, when Miss Welch arrived, you are not to call her by her Christian name. She's to be known as Miss Welch, and you must not speak to her unless she speaks to you.
You know, as soon as she arrived, I remember her very first shot, and you'll see it in the movie, was actually being knocked over on her backside. So it was a sort of baptism of fire, and she became instantly part of the team.
She arrived and she was, hello, Frank, darling, how are you? Saw the rushes yesterday. You were fantastic, she said. What about this stunt? Oh, I'm all right, I'm good with stunts, she said. And she was indeed, a real trooper, as they say. I liked her enormously.
When I got there, I hadn't worked yet, and I could already sort of feel the sort of like expectation of, oh boy, are these two, you know, it's like Raquel and Faye, wait till they, you know, get together. The fur is really going to fly.
There's the French expression, monstre sacré, sacred monster. Indeed, these two ladies are sacred monsters.
That was one of the great coup of the film, was to have these two wonderful, you know, beautiful, exciting women together and in these different parts and confrontation.
Well, I read all kinds of things in the paper too about these so-called feuds, and it's sort of amusing.
I guess I was perhaps even instigating the press to build it.
I needn't have worried because Faye came into the courtyard looking very elegant with her fan. She came marching across the courtyard, the quad, and she came up to me and she said, oh, Raquel, I'm so glad you're here. Really, I'm the biggest fan of yours. I love your work. And everyone went, oh, you know, so disappointing.
I'll do anything you ask if you promise to take the letter.
Oh, what do I... Here I was playing this part of Constance and wondering how it was all going. I was having a great time, but sometimes when you have a good time, you wonder, are we having too much fun? Is this all going to turn out really awful? And then words started coming back while I was shooting. I think people were coming up to me and saying, you are so funny. You are so funny in this. And I would go, but I'm not doing anything. He's told me not to do a thing. How can I be funny? I was so keen on being able to establish myself as an actress with some kind of versatility. Because it was slapstick, this whole thing, you know, I had never done this before. So when I first started actually playing scenes, I was doing a lot of, you know, big faces and big reactions, thinking, oh, broad comedy. And he would keep stopping the camera and saying, just don't do anything. I thought it was a great lesson because after that I knew so well, you know, how sometimes by doing a lot of underplaying, the comedy moment works out much better.
Richard is a brilliant filmmaker. He is extraordinarily fast. I mean, Richard is always ahead of schedule. And sometimes he's so ahead of schedule that one has to convince him to do something again or discuss something.
This was the first period film I think Richard had ever done, although he was a very good director and widely recognized as such. But I think it was an interesting undertaking for him, and we were lucky to have him.
He knew the script backwards. He knew every line of the script. He'd worked all the stunts out, all the business.
His great strength was allowing things to happen. Just, you know, allowing, you know, actors to do their things. And he often shot with 5 cameras, which, you know, picking up little bits of unexpected action and so on.
With his camera system, he has a tremendous potential to cut. because covers everything.
This was often difficult when we were shooting a fight scene because you had 5 cameras. You couldn't put in doubles.
So you had to be careful because sometimes you were in close-up, you didn't know it. Sometimes you were in long shot, you didn't know it. You just had to do it for real and just hope for the best, which most of us did most of the time.
Richard doesn't like actors. And he actually said to me, I love the research, doing the research. I love the post-production, sitting in the editing room. That's my time. I hate the shooting of a picture. You have to get up early at 6 o'clock every morning. Not good first thing in the morning. Never good before about 10 o'clock. And say, all right, Brian, you've designed this, you've been here the longest. Where's the best wide shot here? I say, well, you come over here, Richard. Come down here, and we're on an 18 here. He said, beautiful.
The crew was just in love with this man. He could have anything he wanted. If he'd ordered pink elephants to arrive in 30 seconds, I'm sure they would have somehow miraculously appeared, because everybody in the cast and crew would have done anything that Dick wanted.
And I could still say that he's my desert island director. I would, if I had to take a director to a desert island, I'd take Richard Lester. He's a wonderful man, and he and I made finally 5 films together. And right now he just has decided that I guess a little bit like Greta Garbo in full glory. Just said, "Well, that's it. I'm not going to do movies anymore," which is a pity, because I think he's immensely talented.